They found the clip at 2:13 a.m. Grainy phone footage of a light switching on where it should not be, and a hum that did not belong. At first it looked like a mistake, a maintenance worker doing a lonely job, until the footage was slowed down and the truth started to unspool. What one night shift cleaner captured would, in the weeks that followed, reverberate across factories, shipping yards, and city hall. This is the story of how a single night changed the destiny of a city and of the people who quietly tried to stop it. His name is Min. He works the graveyard shift at a municipal power facility on the edge of the river. He lives in a 7th-floor room that never warms, carries a thermos of coffee that tastes like patience, and keeps his family's picture folded in his wallet. Min was not looking for a story. He was looking for a loose bolt, a sparking connector, anything that could become a hazard before morning. Instead, he found evidence of something deliberate. Parts removed, circuits bypassed, a pattern that repeated across multiple night staff logs. He filmed it because he had to prove it to himself. He uploaded the clip to a private message and then slept while the city carried on. The next morning, whispers moved faster than the news feed. Someone leaked the clip to an engineer who knew how to read the damage. Not a robbery, she said, a substitution. Parts replaced with cheap replicas meant to fail at a predictable time. When we talk about infrastructure, we use abstract words, redundancy, supply chain, maintenance cycles. Tonight, we will make that language human.
Expected ship on the 3rd. Got it open now, I'll update the notification.
Because the real cost of a counterfeit breaker is not a line on a spreadsheet. It is a child's school canceled, an ambulance rerouted, a factory worker sent home without pay. To understand how this happened, you have to follow 3 threads: the unnoticed worker, the market that supplies the parts, and the institutions that should have stopped it. The first thread begins with a man who knows the lights like a neighbor knows the stairs, who can tell by hum or smell what will fail next. Min showed us his rounds, the breadbox-sized breakers behind metal doors, the stickers with faded serials, the logbook where every night is a ledger of small miracles. He told us about the night he noticed a new label on a breaker, printed sloppy, the font wrong, and the equipment suddenly vibrated like a throat clearing. He took out his phone and recorded, hands steady despite the fear that comes from being the only witness in the dark. The clip arrived on an engineer's desk and set off alarm bells. She had worked with these systems for 20 years and could smell a forgery. Her name is Dr. Lean. She had once designed safety protocols for the national grid. Now she shivered as she compared serials and handwriting. It was like finding counterfeit medicine, she told us. The part looked right until you trusted it with a load. It was the second thread that surprised everyone. The market for these parts was not hidden in back alleys. It was a legal, thriving global trade. From sprawling warehouses in neighboring provinces to shipping containers stacked like teeth at ports, the supply chain carried components that were, on paper, certified. On paper is where the deception began. Paper can be printed with stamps, with approvals, with the right logos, and still be false. We followed invoices that took us across borders and through a maze of shell companies, each one a thin veil between buyer and source. It is a common story now. In an age where complexity is an opportunity, complexity in regulation becomes room for shortcuts. The third thread is the institutions, regulators who sign off, purchasing departments that chase price, and auditors who rarely walk an empty night shift. None of this happens in a vacuum. Greed is a force, but so is exhaustion. People cut corners under pressure and then forget the cost. Back at the power plant, Min continued his rounds, unaware that his single video had been replayed behind closed doors and forwarded into executives' inboxes. The engineer sent a message, "Meet me at the southern dock at noon." They brought photocopies, not subpoenas, and a courage that is private and slow. They discovered a pattern, the same supplier's stamp on equipment at 3 different facilities, all showing premature wear and identical failure modes. We talked to a logistics manager who said the profit margin on these substitutions is astonishing, a fraction of the cost for real parts, a margin that invites risk. You don't replace a life-saving component with something cheaper unless the system allows it, he said, and the system does. That line, "the system allows it," is the quiet violence of bureaucracy. It is a machine that sometimes rewards fraud because auditing is weak and incentives are warped. We tracked one purchase order that reads simple and innocuous, replacement parts for routine maintenance. It had a chain of profiteering. The deeper we dug, the more names appeared. Procurement subcontractors, a middleman who specialized in faster deliveries, and an importer with little oversight. We found whistleblowers who would not speak on camera and workers who had small, sharp stories about equipment that acted up right after a cheap batch arrived. A factory foreman we interviewed said, "You can feel it in your hands when something is wrong. The metal isn't the same, the weight is off." Across the city, a pattern appeared not just in breakers but in pumps, in valves, in safety locks, small things that, when they fail, break the rhythm of a neighborhood. One night, a transformer failed in a working-class district and plunged hundreds into darkness. A child was in an oxygen machine, ambulances rerouted, panic left fingerprints on doors. The official report said mechanical failure. The people who lived there told us another story. The replacement part had been last serviced. The week an offshore container arrived. When documentation met testimony, the story became harder to deny. Layers of plausible deniability had a habit of collapsing when witnesses lined up. But deniability is resilient. Contracts can be vague. Certificates can be forged. And when corporations are large, responsibility gets dispersed like smoke. We put our evidence to a procurement officer at a city agency. He took off his glasses and sighed the kind of sigh that feels like a resignation letter. "There are targets we have to meet," he said, "budgets, timelines. If there's a choice between meeting a delivery and delaying a school project, the choice is obvious." He would not be surprised, he admitted, if some suppliers cut corners, but admitting it would mean admitting that systems had failed many times before. Accountability became a courtroom of documents. We subpoenaed logs, traced serial numbers, and watched as the map of culpability grew arms and legs. The first legal move was a recall order. Parts from the suspect batches were pulled and quarantined, an admission that the city was not as infallible as it had seemed. But recall notices are paper promises. They fix a problem going forward. Rarely the damage already done, the missed shifts, the machines ruined in the meantime. We interviewed a mother whose husband had worked nights at a textile plant that depended on these parts. He came home exhausted, coughing, and a week later, he did not wake up. No single report could say with total certainty his death was caused by a failed breaker. But the community had a pattern, and grief is often the most honest statistic. As the scandal widened, a middleman agreed to talk. He was small with a voice like gravel and an apology that sounded like strategy. "We shipped what they asked for," he said. "If someone wanted cheap and needed fast, I provided the fast. Someone else decided the cheap." His words exposed a truth we had been feeling. Accountability is rarely singular. It is a knot of choices stretched over time. Yet there was a surprising actor in this story, a young inspector at the port, who took photos at odd hours and started a private archive of suspicious markings. Her name is Hoa. She would later become one of the reasoned voices that pulled evidence into light, risking her job to document inconsistencies. Hoa told us how she noticed patterns, identical scuffs on boxes, repeated typo in Chinese labels, the same lot numbers handwritten in different inks. She said, "I thought it was small, but small things add up until they make a mountain you cannot move." The mountain moved when investigative journalists published the first full story, and the public finally had a narrative that matched their daily disruptions. For days the city was a newsroom. People argued on buses. At markets, some demanded resignations. Others worried about cost and delay. At night, Min continued his rounds. He did not own a megaphone. He had a flashlight, a habit of careful reading, and a camera in his pocket. When we asked him why he recorded that night, he shrugged and said, "I wanted to remember. When something is wrong, I keep it in my phone." The human heart of this story is not heroes and villains, but people stacked in systems that reward speed over care. We went to a laboratory where technicians tested the suspect parts. They ran them through simulated loads until the metals gave way. "We measure microscopic differences," a technician said. "A tiny change in alloy, a hairline defect, those are the details that kill trust." The lab reports were devastating in their clarity. The counterfeit batch failed at predictable stresses that the genuine parts could withstand. Those reports traveled through the city's legal channels and into the hands of lawyers, preparing class action suits. A suit is a slow engine of justice, and sometimes justice moves too slowly for people whose nights are filled with danger. We spoke to an attorney who explained how difficult it is to prove causation in infrastructure cases, to link a single faulty part to a human life or economic loss. Proof needs documents, witnesses, timber of patterns. It needs the patience of months and the courage of those who sign statements. Yet while the lawyers assembled facts, the public demanded immediate action, audits, resignations, stricter import checks. The city responded with a task force. Cameras were installed in warehouses. Stricter procurement rules were drafted, and relief funds were pledged. But policy is antiseptic where lives are messy. A relief fund cannot bring back wages lost to stoppages or repair the ruptured trust between citizens and institutions. We found communities that had learned to live in the gaps, electricians who carried spare boxes in the backs of motorbikes, nurses who memorized generator schedules. These improvisations are acts of survival and a kind of local knowledge that bureaucracies rarely measure. There was a moment, midway through the crisis, when a large factory accused a small supplier of deliberately selling knockoffs. The supplier responded by claiming he had been deceived in turn, given parts that looked legitimate, packaged with forged certifications. It becomes dizzying. Each finger points to another hand, and the more you follow the trail, the more the trail splits like a river delta. So we asked the question everyone wanted to avoid: who benefits from a system that lets safety be negotiable? The answer is not a single villain. Profit does, certainly, but so do deadlines, bureaucratic understaffing, and the invisible arithmetic of cost-cutting. In a small shop outside the city, we met a manager who spoke of quotas and impossible targets. "If I don't cut cost, I don't stay in business." He was not glamorous. He was tired, and his confession was not dramatic. It was an admission of the pressure that seeds compromise. Pressure compresses ethics. Over time, the exceptional becomes standard, and the standard becomes the way things are done. In the city council, hearings were held. Officials read statements. A minister promised inspections and cooperation with prosecutors.
I'm telling you, that's everything. I don't have more to give.
Then it had better be enough. You know what happens if it's not.
It's all in there.
The hospital
Check it.
corridors lit by phone screens, the sirens. We spent an evening with a nurse who keeps a candle on the counter for patients who come in after dark. She told us how fragile normal life feels. Power keeps the machines running, she said. When it stops, faces change. People become smaller in the dark. The mid-story twist came when an internal memo surfaced. A procurement schedule noting fast-track approval for replacement parts. Tolerate minor variances. That phrase, tolerate minor variances, sounded like legalese until you heard it in the mouths of mechanics, who called it permission to risk. Permission to risk is a culture. It is the moment when rules become suggestions and suggestion becomes policy. With this memo, the case shifted from isolated criminality to structural malpractice, and the conversation turned to reform. We met a social scientist who studies institutional failure. She said, "It's not that people are bad, it's that systems normalize bad outcomes." Normalization is slow. It arrives as a compromise in a meeting, as a silent nod when budgets tighten, as a checklist left unchecked. The reform proposals were sensible: independent audits, transparent tendering platforms, stronger penalties for forged certification. But every reform has a counterweight: enforcement. Rules mean little without the resources and will to apply them. We watched as new systems were trialed: blockade tagging of parts, camera verification at docks, and random spot checks at warehouses. Technology promised traceability, but it cannot mend every human hand that chooses expedience over care. Among the policy debates, men kept working. Then one night, a senior official visited the power plant, and he was asked to show his footage. He did, quietly. He did not ask for a reward. He wanted to know that someone had seen what he had seen, and that it mattered. That moment, a worker's evidence meeting an official's attention, is the small civic miracle we often overlook. But even miracles can be fragile. The official promised action, and some action came, slow and bureaucratic, like thawing ice. We heard stories of replacement parts arriving with new certifications, of managers removed, of new oversight committees convened. And yet, in the evenings, electricians still kept spare boxes in motorbike trunks, because trust does not restore itself with signatures alone. There's a strange intimacy to living with risk. Communities learn to adapt. They invent rituals of care that are invisible to statisticians. A retired engineer we spoke to called this social redundancy, people becoming a backup for systems that were supposed to be fail-safe. He said, "The city will never be perfect, but we can make the layers of protection thicker, and that is a long, patient work." We wanted to know if this scandal would change behavior beyond headlines. Would procurement stay honest when the ink dried? To answer, we visited a small school that had been spared the worst blackouts thanks to a community generator and a volunteer night watch. Teachers taught children emergency routines. Parents organized a roster to check equipment. The crisis had hardened into preparedness. Preparedness is a kind of dignity. It says the community will not be left to luck when public systems falter. Yet the deeper question persisted: how do we build systems that do not require constant human sacrifice? We asked experts about incentives, about procurement law, about the carrot and stick of market regulation. They answered with frameworks and models and a vocabulary that sounded distant, until it met a mother's grief or a mechanic's midnight confession. Change requires aligning incentives, one said. Make safety profitable and shortcuts costly. Make transparency routine, not exceptional. Those are long-term prescriptions. They are the slow plumbing of a better city. They do not erase the nights already lost, but they can prevent new ones. Meanwhile, the legal case advanced. Settlements were discussed. Some suppliers accepted liability. Others fought and delayed. For some families, settlements were small consolation. Money cannot unring the alarm that failed in a hospital corridor. We followed a widow who used her settlement to start a community fund, to buy vetted safety equipment for a neighbor's clinic. Her choice was a quiet refusal to be merely compensated. She turned loss into a public good, and in that act, reshaped grief into action. There were other surprising faces in the aftermath: a middleman who turned state's evidence, and a company director who publicly apologized. Public apologies are rare and theatrical, but when sincere, They can change the texture of a scandal into a beginning of repair. We spent a morning with a group of technicians who formed a grassroots inspection collective, sharing photos and serial numbers online. They called themselves Night Watch. Their language was practical, and their joy was small, identifying a fake seal before it reached a hospital. What started as individual improvisation became community vigilance, a civic infrastructure grown from below. But vigilance does not scale easily. It is hungry work, done by people who already have full days and tired hands. We asked if they were burned out. They smiled and said, "We are doing what we can. It is enough to start." In the end, the city's recovery was uneven. Some systems were fixed, some leaders replaced, and some nights remained tenuous. The scandal exposed a truth that is rarely reported. Resilience is not only engineering, it is moral and social. We returned to Min, who had become an unlikely local figure, neither a hero nor a celebrity, but a man whose vigilance altered events. He confessed he had wanted privacy, but he also said he felt responsibility. If I see something, I must keep it. Someone must. We asked him what he feared most now. He looked at his hands and said that we will forget, that tomorrow someone will choose cheaper again. This fear of forgetting is at the heart of infrastructure tragedies. Memory is the vector of reform, and forgetfulness is their undoing. Our last interviews drew us toward modest remedies, better training for procurement officers, whistleblower protections, community auditing. But the real remedy is cultural, honoring the small acts of care that keep a city lit at night, paying attention to the people who watch the machines. We watch the city at dusk when lights twitch on like promises. There's a fragile choreography to the way communities hold themselves together. In one neighborhood, neighbors gathered to repair a transformer box that had been vandalized, passing tools like a hymn. They worked without cameras, without reporters, because this is how people keep each other safe when systems fail. This story is not over. The courts will continue, policies will shift, and suppliers will adapt in ways we cannot yet predict. But there is a quieter legacy, new networks of inspection, a civic mistrust that demands proof, and a manpower of ordinary watchers. We end where we began, with one phone, one clip, and a man who chose to document what he found. That choice changed the arc of many lives, not because it was cinematic, but because it was honest and persistent. If you want to protect a city, protect the people who move through it at night, the cleaners, the drivers, the nurses, the guards. Their work is invisible until failure reveals their importance, and when it does, we must remember their faces and not only our outrage. In the months after, new rules arrived, but so did new practices, neighbors teaching each other how to read certification marks. Small trainings grew into workshops into local inspector groups, and those groups into a network that shared data with officials. Change, we learned, arrives in public pressure and private acts stitched together, one flashlight at a time. We asked Dr. Lean what she hoped for now. She said that the next time a worker films something, we will act faster and not ask why it took so long. Maybe the best measure of reform is whether ordinary people feel safer doing the job. That keeps a city breathing. We caught a final image of Min folding his coffee thermos, checking the logbook, and tapping the screen of his phone with a small, steady thumb. His footage did not solve everything. It did not end the night, but it altered a conversation and gave others permission to speak. We live with systems that hum. Most nights they keep faith, but sometimes a night reveals a fracture, and that revelation becomes a test. The test is not only technical, it is moral. Will we build structures that reward care, or will we keep rewarding the cheapest option? That choice echoes in hospital corridors and factory floors and in the quiet rooms, where night workers sleep between shifts. In the end, the story is not about a broken city, but about how cities mend themselves through testimony, through law, and through the small brave acts of their people. If you remember one thing from this story, remember the name of the person who kept watch and the camera he carried like a talisman. Remember that vigilance is not a single act, but a habit, and habits are learned by doing, passed hand to hand in the dark. Tonight, when you flick a switch, think for a moment of the people who tend the city's heartbeat and of what we ask of them. We do not end with an answer. We end with a question. What kind of city do we want to be when the lights fail? Do we want one where the cheapest fix wins, or one where the careful hand is valued and protected? Men went back to his rounds. The city rearranged some of its rules. People argued. People repaired. The nights continued. Small changes became habits. Habits became policy. Policy became memory. This is how fragile systems grow stronger. And if you ever find yourself walking the city at night, listen closely. You will hear the hum of machines and the soft footfall of those who watch over them. Their work is never finished. It is a living labor, shaped by choices we make when no one is watching. We will keep telling these stories because they remind us that safety is a shared obligation, not an afterthought. The night that began with a single clip ended with a city changed in ways small and meaningful. It is a beginning and a warning. This is the city's story and the night's witness. Keep your eyes open when you pass the lights, and remember who keeps them burning.